Okay guys, this is the very first game that Bobby Fischer ever lost against the Pirc Defense, our Pirc Defense, right? So I wanted to show you this game because there's of course a lot to learn about it, but it is going to allow us to reinforce what we have learned against the Austrian Attack. For those of you Bobby Fischer's fan, I know you didn't like my thumbnail, but hey, we have to give credit to this amazing opening that I know a lot of you guys are playing. So in this game, let me actually show you from the very beginning, even though those of you who are friends of the channel, you should be more than familiar with this opening. But up to this point, after knight c3, g6, we know that there are different setups that the white pieces could use. One of the most aggressive ones is going to be pawn to f4. And at this point, I told you that after bishop g7 and knight f3, you could castle, and I think that's what Korchnoi did at this point. But the move that I recommended, guys, the one that I like to do is pawn to c5 right away. I'm not going to go into specifics because for that you have lesson 74, but let me show you here after castling for the black pieces, we have bishop e2. Now, one thing about this move, the main line in this opening, in this variation, is actually bishop d3, and it's proven to be better than bishop e2. But one thing that you gotta know is that at this point, when this game was played in 1962, there was not a lot of theory on this opening. And you know what? That's something that I still use to my advantage in 2022. Guys, not many people know a lot about the Pirc Defense. Even if the theory is way better than it was 40 years ago, many people don't really prepare against this. But again, that's something that I told you on lesson number 69 and on. So bishop e2 was played, and now you see pawn to c5. This is the only variation where I play c5. Typically, you know that these openings, the King's Indian Defense, the Pirc, we allow them to control the center perfectly like that. And then we strike the center with e5 or c5. I never play c5, no specific reason, just not my taste. But in this variation, I like to do c5, of course, before castling in my case. But anyhow, the point is the same. So we got c5, and now we're trying to make that center unstable. Guys, there's one game that I uploaded recently to my other channel, and if you go to Tato the Forker, you're gonna see this one game where the black pieces played something like e5, and you see that overextended center. You see how the black pieces took advantage. So feel free to take a look at that one. But in this game, Bobby Fischer just went pawn takes pawn, and then of course we know we're not going to take. If we take, this could get a little bit uncomfortable after e5. So instead, when we do c5, especially when you do it before castling because the king is in the center, we do it with the idea of just going with queen a5. Very simple. Now we're pinning the knight, and we also talked about this on lesson 51, the check piece. And if they continue to take, we have knight e4, same trick, just putting more pressure on c3. And it's not like the white pieces are losing in this position, but the black pieces certainly get a better position. Like if you get something like pawn takes, we got rook e8, and now after castling, you're gonna get something like this. Now still, we don't want to take, there's no need to rush. You could do something like knight c6, and you're going to get your material back with interest. So that's just something to keep in mind. That's why we do c5, followed by queen a5. So again, we strike the center, they accept it, and then we go queen a5. Guys, one more thing I wanted to say about this part of this opening, and I'm sorry that I'm talking so much, but I have a lot to say. I played this opening, I've been playing it for over 20 years, and I have a lot of experience, bad experiences for the most part. Nah, just kidding. With these specific variations, and this is extremely important. If in this position, the white pieces did something like bishop e3, then we could do pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, followed by knight c6. And guys, let me know in the comments if you know this, if you know what opening this looks like other than the Pirc. Well, those of you who are experienced, you should know this looks a lot like the Sicilian defense, the old dragon variation. And you have, it's like if we had started with pawn e4 on the very first move and then pawn c5. It's like a dragon, but the white pieces did a premature f4. And this is very comfortable for the black pieces. And why did I say this is so important? Well, I keep telling you, even if you don't play specific openings, you have to review games, guys, from any opening, because you don't know when ideas from one opening, you could implement them in other openings. Like if you get in this position and you also play the Sicilian defense, you're going to be in your elements. You could lose in your elements, but you're gonna know the middle game plans and so on. But anyhow, going back to the game, from the moment we stroked the center, they took queen a5, castle, and now we get the pawn back with a check, so the king moves, and now we just continue to develop. Knight c6, Very natural move. It does make sense. I have played it myself, but after trying it over and over and over, my personal taste is to just go knight b to d7. And the idea is that this knight wants to end up on c5. And from there, guess what? We're putting pressure on e4. So that's going to be our target. So something to consider. You could do knight c6. You're going to be fine. But knight b to d7 also is something that you have to consider. So in this game, knight c6, then knight d2, and look at this maneuver. The knight is going to d2, getting in the way of the bishop, trying to get to b3. And the question to ask before you do something like this, and I've been there myself, I see a fancy maneuver, I go for it, but guys, you really have to compare the position that you have right now to what you're going to get. Like, what is that knight going to be doing on b3 that is not doing on f3? And look, at the end of the day, this is Bobby Fischer. He knows what he's doing better than I do, but I'm just telling you one way to approach this before you're going to do it in your games. Is my knight really going to be better on b3? Because I'm investing 2 tempos to get to b3. And after I visualize that position, am I really going to get something better? If not, you might just reconsider. Maybe do something like queen e1 in this position. I've seen it before. The queen comes to the king side to attack, something like that. But anyhow, at this point, we have knight d2, and then the black pieces know where the knight is going. We know. So we gotta be thinking, okay, that knight is going to b3. What can we do about it? How can we punish our opponent for doing that? If we can't, we can't. But in this case, the black pieces just went pawn to a5, getting ready for that knight to get to b3, and then we attack it. So of course, knight b3. Now the queen goes back to b6, safe. And now this is coming, so the white pieces are forced to do a4. After this a4 move is done, all of you following this course, guys, you should know what happens, what changed. Every time a pawn is pushed, weaknesses are created. Now look at the square on b4. Automatically it becomes weak. I know they still have the c pawn, it's not a hole, it's not a weakness, but it is going to be hard for them to defend it. So guess what? The knight is going to b4. Very powerful knight, and it's putting pressure already on c2, d3, and you're going to see how this is decisive in this game. Now, one thing that I wanted to highlight here is that whenever you have this, you could think of, okay, this is the defender of the knight. So if I could do something like this, imagine the queen is gone, imagine there's a rook here. I could do something like knight takes e2, rook takes, and then I get the knight. So after knight b4, we got pawn to g4, and this is the moment of the blunder, guys. And this is in a way, I like Bobby Fischer a lot, but I gotta tell you, when I see a move like this, which is a blunder, you're gonna see why. It makes me feel better in a way, because if Bobby Fischer blundered like this, I mean, it makes me feel better about my blunders, guys. And you're gonna see it's not that complicated to calculate, but it's definitely losing after pawn g4. Like, you should know by now. Please take your time, pause the video, and try to understand why is this such a big deal. Why is g4 such a bad move? And of course, you're going to be thinking, oh, because he's exposing the king. The pawn in front of the king is being pushed. But there's a specific continuation that made the black pieces get in the lead. Now, something that I'm going to tell you, going back to the idea that this looks a lot like a Sicilian defense game. Something that might have been done here perfectly is something like bishop f3. You're going to see it in these kind of positions. And then we have bishop e6. This is something thematic in the Dragon Sicilian. Now, here I'm setting up that tactic. If they do something, I don't know, a bad move like h3 right now, I could take on c2, queen takes, and you see now my bishop and queen are both attacking the hanging knight. So just something that I wanted to highlight there. But anyways, after g4, this is the idea, and let's try to do it in our head. I'm going to, of course, show you the entire game, but let's just practice visualization. So I realize I'm attacking that pawn twice, and the white pieces are defending it twice, but this queen is actually overloaded. It's looking at g4, it's looking at c2. And when I take on c2, again, I'm hitting that rook, but I'm hitting the knight as well. So that's the beginning of this tactic. I'm playing this game, I see that they do g4, this is odd, a little bit weird. Can I punish it? Well, I'm gonna think of moves like h5, but then I also realize I'm attacking it. And if I visualize that, we have to look into it, even if it looks nonsense. It has to be, guys, a candidate moves. We have talked about candidate moves. So when you visualize that, the queen is here. Well, knight c2, I'm attacking the rook, I'm attacking the knight. So that's exactly what happened here. Bishop takes, knight takes, and after queen takes, we got knight to c2. And of course, knight b5, they are, instead of giving this knight for free, they're going to give the exchange. And now look at this position. We have talked a lot about how two minor pieces are superior to a rook, even rook and pawn, but in this case it's rook and two pawns. And not only that, if you look at the next very simple maneuver that the black pieces did, you're going to see that it's just devastating for the black pieces. Now, I invite you guys to pause the video and really think of what you do next. I'm not looking for anything fancy, just simple. You should know this next move. It should come, at least it should be one of your candidate moves. The next move has to do with something that we have talked about before. We have our dark square bishop, but we don't have the light square bishop, and we have talked about it. When you're missing one of your bishops, guys, the queen should supplement, the queen should replace that bishop. So now that the white pieces don't have the light square bishop, the light squares are going to be weak, and I'm going to capitalize on it. So not only is my queen replacing my own bishop, but of course I'm taking advantage of the fact that they do not have the light square bishop. So queen c6 is the next move, attacking the pawn, pinning it, but then after they do f5 to defend it, two things that I want you to remember. Number one, I continue to travel through the light squares because again, the light square bishop is gone for my opponent. But second, look at this f5. A lot of you guys, even if you're ahead, you see a move like this and you freak out. You just resign. This is checkmate, right? And I've told you over and over and over, there's a lot that needs to be done before they actually get to your king. So don't freak out. There's a long way to go. Just be objective. Continue to play your game. I have my bishop to defend, my rook, my queen could come over at any time. My opponent's pieces, only these two are putting pressure on my king. These three pieces are on the other side of the board. So queen c4, hitting the rook, hitting the pawn, and after queen f3, we got queen takes pawn. Now, knight c7, be careful with that knight because it's ready to come over to the king's side and attack the king. Look, if I'm the black pieces here, I know that my opponent, if they just stay quiet and get into the endgame, this is winning for me. So the only hope they have is to create complications around my king. And we have talked about it too. If I'm losing, I need to go all in and attack the king, create complications. So they gave us the free knight and we're saying right now, give me the knight, take the rook, you're giving me two knights for a rook, I'm gonna be ahead by a lot. But of course, they don't want that. Fischer is trying to come over and attack the king. So now we have rook e8, protecting the pawn. Look, one piece coming from the queen side to the king side. I have 1, 2, 3 pieces over here, 1, 2, 3 pieces over here. So I need to have the same amount of defenders as they have attackers. Now bishop g5 with a tempo on the queen, and that's fine. And now we got queen b2, bishop takes c7. We don't really care if they get the rook, guys. Even if they got the rook and we take back, we're going to have the same amount of pieces, queen, minor piece, and rook, but I'm going to have extra pawns, passed pawns. So bishop e5, I need to make sure that after the pawn is gone, I need to make sure that they don't close me in. If after this move I do something silly and they do f6, this is going to be trouble. So the bishop gets out. Notice that there are no weaknesses on my dark squares because even though my pawns are not protecting them, my bishop is still on the board. So bishop e5, rook f2, and now this is, believe it or not, one of the moves that I like the most in this game. Simple, ordinary, but basically queen c1 is making sure that my queen comes into the game. Now, why is this so so nice to see for me? Well, you don't know how many games I've lost because I left my queen on the other side of the board. I was being attacked and I was like, oh man, if my queen or my knight or my rook were here, but they wouldn't get in time. So seeing this, now they have 4 attackers. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 defenders. And if I survive this attack, the game is over. So after h3, don't forget, we're doing checkmate on h2. So it was queen c1, transferring over to the queen, to the king side with a tempo because we're trying to do checkmate. So h3, pawn takes, look at this, opening up the king, pawn takes, bishop f8, and then after we take knight e7, no big deal, king moves, knight f5. Notice that the knight is active, they have the queen and the rook, but again, I got enough pieces to defend, there's no checkmate. So queen goes to e6, rook g1, that's fine, and now march. Again, 3 pieces, we calculate there's no weakness on the dark squares. If this bishop were gone, that's a different story. Now rook g4, queen b3, offering trade of queens. That's it, with the queens off the board, there's no attack. This is going to be now about the passed pawns. So queen goes to f1, passive, they just don't want to trade, and the pawn keeps pushing. It was interesting to look at things like putting the queen here, trying to get to h2, but no need. a3, then rook g3, And then let's see if we can find the final move that made Bobby Fischer resign here. Well, the final move is very interesting. Once you see the pawn on a3 and the bishop is controlling the promotion square, they just have one more square to push actually. And that's why the black pieces just did. Maybe unnecessary, but very cool move. Give me the rook, and now the pawn is gone. That's it. There's nothing they could do to stop it. And this is just decisive. So with that said, guys, if you're new to this channel and you want to learn more about the Pirc Defense, there's an entire playlist. We have covered almost every single line that a Pirc Defense player needs to know. So take a look at it. And like always, I'll talk to you in the comments. See you in our next lesson.